Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Wednesday, there was a really good interview. Saints tight end Juwan Johnson gave an interview on Sirius XM NFL radio. And he made a couple of really interesting comments. One was comparing Derek Carr and Drew Brees and their in how they've sort of led the team so far.
It honestly felt like we've been working with Derek for quite a while now, and so OTAs was really good, really smooth, and you know he's giving me more of a feel because he's an older guy. He's giving me a lot of Drew, going into the huddle, commending the huddle, the guys gravitating to him. These are things I've seen how Drew conducted the huddle, how Drew conducted the offense, and things like that. So it's giving me similar feels. And so I'm really excited about what Derek has and how he's going to move this offense.
You know, the most interesting part of that is my initial default is to say, well, look, that sounds right because Derek Carr is a 9-year NFL veteran and Drew Brees played for 20 years. So it's natural that a guy who's had that much experience would command the huddle. And then I think, well, who was commanding the huddle last year? And I go, oh, it was Andy Dalton, a guy that's been in the league for more than a decade now. So I don't know that Juwan Johnson meant that as a knock to Andy Dalton. It's also worth mentioning that in Juwan Johnson's time in New Orleans, he's also seen Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian, and last year Jameis Winston as well for a small portion of the season before his injury. But primarily a year ago, it was Andy Dalton. Again, I don't know that that was necessarily a knock on Andy Dalton, but more of a compliment to Derek Carr to say, there are guys that are veterans that maybe don't have that command, that presence. We've all, I don't care what level of sport you played. If you played any level of sport, we're all familiar with those types of people who, when they talk, everyone shuts up. You listen. And it helps when that player, you talk to people on the 2011 LSU football team, that player was Tyrann Mathieu. Everyone got in line. And that was a very young team, if you remember. That team was largely loaded up with sophomores, guys that returned in 2012. But Tyrann was a sophomore, and when he spoke, everybody listened. So it's not always a quarterback, but it helps when it's the guy at the most important position on the field. The other thing that Juwan Johnson said was not only just about presence and moxie and aura and command, but it was also about the offense on the field.
Yeah. I feel like with Derek, there's a lot of things that you can do. He's been in an offense where, he's had Josh McDaniels, John Gruden, so he has a lot of that he can bring over to, our offense. Obviously, we have a lot of pieces on our offense, which I think he's probably never had before. So I feel like that's something that he could use a little bit. And so a big credit to Pete. I mean, Pete's been working his tail off this offseason. We got some stuff in there. I'm like, Pete, I've never seen this before, but I like it. And so I'm really excited for Pete going into year 2. He's been behind Sean for so long, and so he's learned a lot, and now he's ready to blow up now.
Okay, so 2 things there. Number 1, the Pete, of course, is Pete Carmichael. And that's pretty interesting because I think there is absolutely some validity to the idea that a year ago, Pete Carmichael, first time not with Sean Payton, bounty year notwithstanding. Of course, Sean Payton was out and Pete Carmichael called the plays. But other years when Pete Carmichael called plays, he was standing next to Sean Payton. He was in meeting rooms with Sean Payton. They were working the offense together. And there is some validity to the idea, I believe, that last year, Pete Carmichael just kept doing what they were doing and had been doing in tandem without saying, let me do my thing. And maybe now with a full year off to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to evaluate. Now, this is my playbook. It's not mine and Sean's playbook. It's not Sean's playbook with my opinions. It's mine. I got a defensive-minded head coach who said, here is your blank canvas. Go make beautiful art. And you hear Juwan Johnson say it. I'm like, dang, Pete, I didn't know you had all this. That's encouraging. Like, I am curious to see what that looks like. That doesn't, because I think so often, and I'm guilty of this as well, I look at the Saints draft Kendre Miller and I go, oh, well, they're just trying to get the next Alvin Kamara because they're going to throw the ball, and we know what they like to throw the ball to the backs out of the backfield and all. And I'm like, do they? Is that what Pete Carmichael wants to do, or is that what was that Sean Payton's thing? I don't know. Maybe we start to see what Pete Carmichael's offense looks like this year instead of Sean and Pete this year. That, to me, is fascinating. Now, the other thing that Juwan Johnson said in that cut that I fundamentally disagree with is when he said, and I quote, we have a lot of pieces on our offense that he can bring over to offense. I'm sorry, here it is. We have a lot of pieces on our offense, which I think he's probably never had before. Okay. Now that I fundamentally disagree with. Last year in Las Vegas, the Raiders brought Derek Carr's college teammate and best friend, who at the time was catching passes from Aaron Rodgers and was pretty widely assumed to be the best or top 2-3 wide receivers in the NFL, in Davante Adams. There is no receiver on the New Orleans Saints team that rivals Davante Adams. When Michael Thomas was at his peak, we could have that conversation. You cannot have that conversation today. Respect to Chris Olave, 1,000-yard season as a rookie. He is not Davante Adams at his peak. Not yet. Maybe one day. We'll see how it all transpires. But it wasn't just Davante Adams. They had Josh Jacobs, first-round pick. They had Darren Waller, freak show tight end. They had Foster Moreau, who's now in New Orleans as well. They had Hunter Renfrow as well, who the Saints looked at trying to bring in. So please don't tell me that Derek Carr didn't have pieces with the Raiders that he has now. That, I can't buy that at all. And honestly, while Derek Carr threw for 3,800 yards last year, and look, he didn't start the last 2 games of the season. They benched him. Because he had so many weapons offensively is part of the reason that I've been given pause, and probably a big part of the reason why the Raiders said, you know what? We have all of this for you. We got you Davante Adams. We had Darren Waller. We got Josh Jacobs, a first-round running. We gave you all these pieces, and we still stink. Now, maybe that's Josh McDaniels. Maybe that's what happened with Gruden being out. I don't know. I don't cover the Raiders. I don't know their culture. I'm not there every day. But just looking and saying you got more pieces now that he never had before is baloney. Now, I do believe one thing that's really been really cool. Back to the first part about what Juwan Johnson said. Can you play that again, Alondra, please? The first one about comparing him to Drew Brees. I don't know that I need the whole thing. Just play it again, please.
It honestly felt like we've been working with Derek for quite a while now. And so OTAs was really good, really smooth. And, you know, he's giving me more of a feel because he's an older guy. He's giving me a lot of Drew, you know, going into the huddle, commanding the huddle, the guys gravitating to him. Okay,
that's enough. So you get the gist of it. We have heard that from all of the Saints that have been asked about Derek Carr. We have heard Tyrann Mathieu rave about him. We have heard Cam Jordan rave about him. That has been a consensus from all of the veteran players that have talked about Derek Carr. He's commanding the team. It's his team. He's the captain. He owns the locker room. They like he has assimilated perfectly, and that is great news. If you're Saints fan, that is the best news. The worst thing that could happen is new guy comes in and everybody hates him. New guy comes in, immediately gets the C on his jersey, and nobody likes him and nobody respects him. Like, that's a worst case scenario. Clearly, that has not happened. That's great. Also, guys like him enough to follow him. Bryan Edwards, Raider receiver, he's now Saints receiver, Bryan Edwards, free agent. Foster Moreau, Raider tight end, is now Saints tight end, Foster Moreau. We talked about Lynn Bowden. Lynn Bowden from Kentucky was a Raider draft pick. Now, the Raiders traded him before he ever played for him, but who do you think had Lynn Bowden come work out? Billy Price, the center they just signed after the tryout in minicamp. Spent 2022 with the Raiders as a lineman protecting Derek Carr. So a lot of dudes that have played with him have followed him here to New Orleans because they like him. So that is a very, very, very good thing. My one lingering question is still, okay, he's got a lot of weapons. Pete Carmichael's designing a great offense. The players love him. He's got command of it, all that sort of stuff. Has he hit his ceiling as a quarterback in the NFL? That is my one big remaining lingering question for Derek Carr. Has he peaked? Have we seen peak Derek Carr? Maybe, and I've shared this with you before. Because I think there is a very legitimate reason to say that he is Andy Dalton. They're through 9 years, team that drafted him, they put up very similar numbers. Through 9 years, Carr 3,500 yards, Dalton 3,400 yards. By the way, Dalton had missed 11 games, Carr missed 4. So Dalton with 7 more games than Carr. Carr with 7 more games than Dalton, excuse me. So Carr played 7 more games, so the stats are a little bit higher. Almost identical number of yards. Carr, 217 touchdowns, Dalton 204. Interceptions, Carr 99, Dalton 118. So through 9 seasons, stats are almost identical. And that's the time where their teams that drafted him said, bye-bye. And we saw what happened with Dalton. He went to Chicago, went to Dallas, New Orleans, Carolina, 4 years, 4 different teams, because he was done. The team that drafted him knew he was done. I think Derek Carr has to prove that he's not done. Can he play? Sure. Can he play at a high level? Well, high-ish. How high? Championship level high? That's where my skepticism comes into play. But as far as a guy that's ready to lead, command, the guys clearly love him. I love that Pete Carmichael is doing creative things in the offense. I love that they have pieces there. But he had pieces with the Raiders as well, and they couldn't win. How high is Derek Carr's ceiling? I don't know the answer to that, but it's going to be fascinating to find out, because the answer to that question will determine how legitimate of an NFC contender the Saints are in what feels like a wide open NFC after the Eagles. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.